What's up, guys? It's Joe Garcia, GarciaMMA.com. Today I'm going to talk about two things real quick. One, I'm going to answer the second most common question people ask me, and that's, do you get nervous before a fight? The first one is, how do I get a fight? But the second most common question I hear is, do you get nervous before fights? And then I'm going to make some book recommendations. What a lot of people don't know about me is I don't know if I'd call myself a bookworm, but I do like to read a lot. My goal was to read 100 books in 2017, and I just cracked number 26, and it's almost November, so I'm definitely not going to read 100. But I like to read. I like to read a lot of self-help stuff to help me improve as an athlete, as a businessman, as a husband, as a father. So let's get to this question. Do you get nervous before a fight? The short answer is, fuck yeah, I get nervous before a fight. I think when you're about to go in a cage and get into a fist fight with a person, anybody would get nervous. But people's definition of nervous and what we interpret as nervous might differ from person to person, okay? And if you're training the right way, there's really no reason to be nervous. So it's like if I took a plank, right? I heard this from Chael Sonnen. He was talking to a group of fighters, and it really resonated with me. If I took a plank, right? If I took like a 2x4 and I set it down on the ground, and I asked you to walk across it, would you do it? Right? Most people are going to say, yeah, it's a trivial task, of course. So if I took that same 2x4 and I put it up on two 10-foot ladders, would you still walk across it? Okay, and everybody's going to stop and think for a second. The task doesn't change. It's the environment that changes. And when that environment changes, okay, that's when people get nervous. So what we do in the cage isn't any different, and most of the time not any worse than what you're doing in the gym every day. But it's the environment that changes. Now you feel like you have to win, and you're fighting in front of all these people, and this counts, and people tend to get nervous. And another thing about nerves is it's your body preparing itself to do what it does, right? So like if I told you to imagine a chalkboard, right? So close your eyes and imagine there's a chalkboard in front of you, okay? And now keep your eyes closed, and now imagine me taking my nails and running my nails down that chalkboard. Right? A lot of people are going to cringe. Even though it's not actually happening, that's probably going to make you cringe thinking about it, because your mind can't tell the difference between something that's actually happening and something that you're just visually imagining, something you're vividly imagining, right? So that brings me to the other thing I want to talk about. 4 books I think every athlete should read. I don't care if you're not a bookworm, if you haven't read a book since grade school. These are 4 books I think every MMA fighter, every jiu-jitsu player, every boxer, every power lifter, any athlete should read. Okay, and the first one is The Mindful Athlete by George Mumford. This is an older book. George Mumford was I believe was a sports psychologist who worked with some of the biggest names out there. He worked with Michael Jordan. He didn't work with a lot of fighters, but he worked with a lot of athletes. And what this book does, this book is where I get the nails on a chalkboard thing. It kind of focuses around Buddhism, which I am in no way, shape, or form a Buddhist, but I think a lot of the principles of mindfulness and AOB, awareness of breath, and finding that space in between breaths is really, really helpful for athletes, especially athletes like me who tend to get inside their own head. I discovered this book after the last fight that I lost. The last fight that I lost was actually 2015. It's my first title fight, and I actually wrote an article called Losing an MMA Fight. I'll put that in the description if you want to check that out. But basically what happened was, this fight was mine to win. We were very evenly matched, and I got inside my own head to the point that by the time I stepped in the cage, I was already mentally beaten. I had already lost that fight backstage before I even got warmed up. And that kind of got me in the mindset of wanting to get into these sports psychology books and kind of get inside and reverse engineer my own head. So The Mindful Athlete, The Secrets to Pure Performance by George Mumford. I highly recommend that one. The second book is going to be The Fighter's Mind by Sam Sheridan. I actually pulled the cover off of this one. But Sam Sheridan, his more popular work was a book called The Fighter's Heart, where he goes on a vacation to Thailand and kind of tries to live out, training like an MMA fighter. But The Fighter's Mind, it functions almost like a case study. He goes from person to person, interviewing them, talking about their lives, talking about their mental processes, and kind of the habits that led them to their success and their pros and cons and takeaways and things like that. It starts with a chapter called Fire and Brimstone that's about Dan Gable. It is probably my favorite chapter of any book. It just sucks you right in right away. I've probably read this a dozen times. But The Fighter's Mind by Sam Sheridan is a really, really great book, and I highly recommend picking that up. He goes into Dan Gable, Frank Shamrock, so this is more fighters. Andre Ward, and there's some really, really good stuff in there. The third one is The Champion's Mind. I know it's kind of got a similar name. This is by a sports psychologist named Jim Aframo. The Champion's Mind, basically just like the description says, how great athletes think, train, and thrive. This same thing kind of functions like a case study. Talks about Serena and Venus Williams, the wisdom of a champion. He talks about bringing your best and methods to bring your very best to every single practice, or your gold medal self. A really, really good book. Inside this book is basically, it's like having 100 sessions with a sports psychologist. This is a really, really insightful book. The one takeaway I had with this book was that it talked about kind of being in your prime and staying in your prime, but it didn't really talk about something that fighters in particular are accustomed to, which is injuries and staying out of your own head when you feel like you might be toward the end of your career. Let's say you got an injury, or you have to take some time off for training, or you have to balance fighting with personal life, which brings me to Jim's second book, The Champion's Comeback, how great athletes recover, reflect, and reignite. This book, I actually picked up this book after I dislocated my elbow in March. Same deal, I was training for a title fight. It was arguably the biggest fight of my life. I was 15 days out, and I completely dislocated my elbow, tore my ulnar collateral ligament, and I was just inside my own head. I was a freaking wreck, and that book could not have come at a better time in my life. So yeah, both of Jim Aframo's books I really, really recommend picking up. Sports psychology, you know, as athletes, we tend to take so seriously training our bodies. We take our physical training seriously, and we lift weights, and we run, and some of us even take our nutrition very seriously, and we're all about the body and getting the body right, but we don't focus on the mind. It's like training only half of yourself. You know, if you only train your physical self, you have to train your mental self too. I would say the mental side of it is 90% of it, because I have had myself in peak physical condition, but until I became proactive about training my mind and getting myself in peak mental condition, I would say I was always functioning at less than 50%. And once I got my mind right, I started to see my physical self as well just take off. So like I said, I highly, highly recommend picking up these 4 books. The Champion's Comeback by Jim Aframo, The Champion's Mind by Jim Aframo, The Fighter's Mind by Sam Sheridan, and The Mindful Athlete by George Mumford. I am not in any way, shape, or form affiliated, sponsored, or at all by these books or these authors. These are just 4 books that have provided really, really valuable insight for me, and I would say even changed the path of my career. So even if you're not a big reader, I really recommend going up and picking up a few of these books and taking a look at it. If you have any books that you recommend, I would love to hear them in the comments. If you've already read these books, I'd like to hear what you think, and I appreciate any feedback. So please like, share, comment, subscribe, and send me a message.